Okay, for today's Catholic Masterclass, we're just going to continue to move toward the sanctuary, or into the sanctuary actually now. So last week we talked about the priest walking down the aisle toward the sanctuary. Then what happens when he arrives there? So when he arrives, the priest will genuflect if there's a tabernacle in the sanctuary, because in the tabernacle is the Eucharistic hosts that are reserved there, the real presence of Jesus living in our midst, living among us. And I've talked about genuflection before, how it is an acknowledgement of, like, I need to lower myself in the presence of the Lord, who is so great and who is so good. So I lower myself. I get down to my knees to recognize his glory. And if there's not a tabernacle in the sanctuary, some churches have a separate place for the tabernacle. If there's not a tabernacle in the sanctuary, the priest will bow to the altar. And so anyway, so however that happens, then from there he enters into the sanctuary and he goes to the altar and he kisses the altar. So that's what I want to look at today. What exactly is going on? So to understand that, we got to, again, understand Christ. So we could say that Jesus is the priest, the altar, and the sacrificial victim of what's going on in the sacrifice of the Mass, which is united to the sacrifice of Calvary and the Lord's Supper, the Last Supper. So when we say that he's the priest, okay, so he is the one who offers the sacrifice. That's what the priest does. Jesus says, no one takes my life from me, but I willingly lay it down. So he offers himself in sacrificial love for our salvation. He is the sacrificial victim. You know, he's offering not just any sacrifice, but he's offering his own body, his own blood in sacrifice. But then to say that he's the altar, what does that mean? Well, what is an altar? An altar is the place where the sacrifice happens. So in other words, the altar is the place where divine and human realities connect, so that the divine can accept the human offering of sacrifice. So when we say that Jesus is the place of sacrifice, that's the reality that we're getting at, is that it is in him that the divine and the human meet. In fact, it's in his very person, because of what we call the hypostatic union, that his divine nature and his human nature are united into the one person of Christ. And you think about this, like the cross of Jesus, to be crucified at the time of the crucifixion, at the time of the Roman Empire, it was a humiliating death that was meant for criminals. And so if there's no real sacrifice taking place there, the wood is not a sign of holiness, but it's a sign of embarrassment, of shame, of criminal status. But because of who Jesus is, he makes the wood of the cross holy. So we might think of the cross as being the place of sacrifice, and so we might think of the altar as a symbolic reality of the cross. And I think there's that element in it for sure. But ultimately, it is because of the person of Jesus that makes the cross holy. And so in so many ways, Jesus is the place of sacrifice. It's within his body, because his human nature, united with his divine nature, is being offered in himself to the Father. So the altar is a symbol of the presence of Christ. So when the priest bows to the altar, or when you see anyone bow to the altar, that's at least hopefully what's in their mind, that they're thinking of is, I'm bowing to this symbolic reality, this sign of the presence of Christ in our midst. We could say that the altar is Christ. Not in the same way that the Eucharist is Christ. The Eucharist is the real presence of Christ, whereas the altar is a sign of Christ's presence. So two different things, and one is definitely better than the other. But nonetheless, we bow to the altar as a sign of reverence, as a sign of humility, as we come into this presence of these divine realities that are taking place. And when the priest kisses the altar, again, if the altar is understood to be a sign of Christ, it is an expression of love, an expression of deep reverence, of deep respect for the one who has offered himself in sacrifice. And in addition to that, in the earliest days of the church, when they would build their altars, they would build them over the tombs of the martyrs, over the tombs of those who literally sacrificed themselves for the sake of the gospel. They shed their blood in union with Jesus shedding his blood. And so they would build altars over those tombs to express what we call the communion of saints, this reality that those who have gone before us in a state of faithfulness and a state of God's grace, they share in union, a greater union with Christ than we share now. And so we at the same time share a union with them, the communion of the saints. And in fact, if you I don't recommend you just go into the sanctuary at your church, but you might ask your priest, like, do we have, because what happens is throughout history, altars are built with an altar stone. And this is not every church nowadays, but it used to be the case that there was an altar stone that within the stone that was placed on the what's called the mensa, the top of the altar stone had a relic of a martyr within it to make that connection with the communion of saints. So when the priest would come to kiss the altar, he wouldn't just kiss the altar itself, like the wood or the stone, but he would kiss the altar stone, which had the relic within it. So it was like, I'm kissing this sign of Christ's presence, but I'm also uniting myself with the communion of the saints who are praying for us and who actually come to be with us during the Mass, to worship God. We actually talk about how during Mass, like, this divine reality comes and connects itself. It is connected with our human reality in the divine mystery of the Mass. Heaven touches earth, a really, really beautiful reality. So anyway, when you see the priest do this, and I understand that maybe sometimes you don't even recognize that this happens because, maybe you're singing the song and you're looking in the hymnal or something like that. But if you see this, just recognize that's what the priest is doing, is he's kissing Christ ultimately, because the altar is Christ, or it's a sign of Christ's presence. And so he's showing respect and love and devotion and humility toward the one who lays down his life. And it is here in this specific place where our human reality is being united with the divine reality of heaven and the heavenly sacrifice of Jesus to the Father. So I hope that's helpful for you, and we'll just continue to move forward next week. God bless you.